Joining us now, Vanessa Neumann. She predicted this. She said Brazil was going to go for change and elect a conservative, right-of-center new president. That has happened in the runoff. Vanessa Neumann, great to have you with us.
Great to be on with you again, John. Thanks.
I know.
Always a pleasure. So yesterday in Brazil, Tropical Trump won. That's literally what they call him. He's Tropical Trump. That's what the Brazilians wanted, and that's what they got. And like in an 11-point lead, which is, and he almost won in the first round. He came really close. So this victory was bigger. We had all predicted that he would win, but it was bigger than anybody predicted. The first round was. So this is the Brazilian people have spoken, and they want a right-winger who'll drain the swamp down there and provide safety and security, and they got it.
All right, now let me ask you this. I got a couple callers text me in earlier today and asked me if we were going to talk about this. And then one of them asked me, how do we pronounce his name? Because they say on TV it's being pronounced 5 different ways. How do you say his name?
Okay, well, good. His first name is Jair. It's very soft. A lot of Brazilian names are soft, like Jair Bolsonaro. Jair Bolsonaro. So it's a tough one. We're going to have to come up with a nickname. We could stick with Tropical Trump.
I like that better because it was interesting. This one gentleman texted me. He said, I've heard his name is pronounced 5 different ways on TV. How do you say it? Jair Bolsonaro. I guess
Jair Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro. Yeah.
I'll just call him President-elect Bolsonaro. How's that? That's
there you go. That's perfect.
Easiest one to do. Tropical Trump. Boy, you look at some of his platforms. You know, he said the other day, he said, you know, when I look back in history, the military coup in Brazil wasn't such a bad thing.
So this is what's going to be interesting about him, right? To separate what's going to be fact from what's going to be fiction. Like in Latin America, you still have the culture of what we call the caudillo, caudillo is like the strong man. It's almost like a warlord, right? So like when you had all the, you have these vast tracts of land, a little bit like the American West, right? Like you had the cowboys in the West. So in Latin American history, you have these big tracts of land, and these guys had their own little private armies, and they would fight the Spanish. And so the leaders of that are caudillos. They're kind of like warlords. But that culture of the strong man is still very prevalent, right? And that's how you Bolsonaro's one, Chavez is a left-wing one. You get him on both the right and the left. But it's that sort of cult of personality of trust me, I'm going to defend you and keep you safe, right? So he's got that personality, and he's bucked the trend. So they love it when he talks tough, right? And he's talked really, really tough, which is why he's so controversial. He has said he's a sexist. I mean, he has said he considers women inferior, which doesn't make me happy. He's anti-gay, which also doesn't make me happy. But what has happened is that the Brazilians are so fed up with the main sort of two-party system, and more than the two-party system. I mean, they have like 15 parties, right? But like 2 dominate. And the one that has dominated for the last almost 2 decades is the left-wing party, the Workers' Party. That's supposed to be, for the poor and poverty reduction. They kind of worked for a few years. They did reduce poverty for the first few years of the first term of what was called Lula. And then by the end, they just absolutely stole everything. So the corruption is just so massive. And the violence and the insecurity has just gone through the roof. So they said, I want change. And I want someone who's going to be tough and protect me. And that's what they voted for. There's a lot of hope. Now, Brazilians are, of course, there are some people who are racist, sexist, homophobic. It is Latin America after all. But by and large, a lot of people voted for him who said, I don't agree with any of that, but I want, he's not the left wing who kept stealing from our country for the last 2 decades. So there's a lot of betting going on that they can get him to do what they need him to do, bring the security, and that they can then modify his views on some of the social issues later on.
We're with Vanessa Neumann. She's the president of a firm, Asymmetrica, and she's a Venezuelan native. also a citizen of the United States, and our number one voice in South America. She's spot on all the time, predicted this victory. Back on her show many, many months ago, before anybody heard of this guy, she said, watch the elections in Brazil. There's going to be a major shift there, a major change. And that was about 12 months ago, and she was spot on. Let me just ask you something, Vanessa Neumann, straight out.
You make me sound like I should play the lottery.
Well, you're smart. I mean, and also, I got to tell my audience this. Everything she has predicted to me that would happen in South America since we met and started talking to each other has panned out. So that's why she's now a regular on my show, and you really need to pay attention because she's very dialed in and she understands all this stuff. So, Vanessa Neumann, let me just ask you straight out. Are the Brazilian people better off today than they were a week ago?
I think so. Definitely. I think so. He's going to, if he can, he has a very strong platform to end the corruption and some of the aspects of political patronage. Now, as you and I know, because you and I live in the swamp of Washington, D.C., that's easier said than done, right? In other words, you may have all the good intentions, all the good anti-corruption intentions on the planet, but then, reality hits. And coalitions form against you, et cetera, and it gets dicey fast. Yes, I think that he will definitely crack down on some of the skirmishes and organized crime groups that are trafficking drugs from Bolivia through Brazil into the rest of the world. He's got the issues at the border of the refugees from my country who are fleeing a communist failing state to find new opportunities. You have Venezuelans fleeing into Brazil. That has caused a lot of problems. The Brazilians won't officially acknowledge that they've got a lot of, Middle Easterners being radicalized in the rural areas. They say that's not the case, but everybody knows it is. And Jair Bolsonaro is one of the few people who says we've got a problem and we need to address that. And Wall Street likes him. He's going to be pro-business, and by ending corruption or reducing corruption, that's going to be good for business, for foreign investment. He's going to need a lot of counseling in terms of his foreign relations, right? He needs to just get a good team around him because he doesn't really understand how to deal with the rest of the world. But Wall Street is very bullish on this guy, and by being a conservative and a right-winger, he's not going to take away foreign businesses. So if U.S. business goes down there and you've got a lot of oil, you've also got a lot of soybeans and a lot of beef, right? Those are huge, and coffee. Those are huge, huge, huge commodities that American companies invest in. He's not going to steal American investment. He's going to let the Americans come in, make money, and, work in partnership with them. So I think this is all going to be great for Brazil. And as I said, after 2 decades of very left-wing governments throughout the region, basically pillaging the economy and stealing everything they could, the region has said enough. So this is going to be good for them. And on a slightly more personal note, as you mentioned, I'm a native from Venezuela, and I'm very opposed to the socialist, corrupt, drug trafficking government that has taken over my country. And Bolsonaro is going to be good for us. He's going to pressure for change in Venezuela as well. He's not going to accommodate all those shenanigans right on his border.
Just explain Brazil's, Vanessa Neumann, system of government. Can he get things done unilaterally? Does he need the parliament or the Congress? How does that work? So we know.
Oh, okay. So it's a very federative. In fact, it's called the Federative State of Brazil. Is like the official, title, name of the country, right? So the problem is that he has, like the United States, right? You have a federal government, and then you have local governments. You have local governments that of the governorships that are that they have a lot of power. So they're in, like you have in the U.S., there's certain things that the president can't force the states to do. You have the same thing over there. but he has, there are a number of, he also won a number, his party won a number of governorships and also won a number of won a significant number of governorships and a significant number of the Congress. So he has a very strong mandate because even other parties had joined. So as I explained in the first round of elections, I think we had, was it 13 candidates, I believe?
Yes.
From 13 different parties, which is normal down there. Like every party gets to run a candidate. Then the top two go to the second round. But by the time you go to the second round, the parties have divided, right? So they have now realized that they need to, a lot of them went and joined the Bolsonaro coalition. And now that Bolsonaro has such a strong mandate with the electoral vote, and he won many governorships, and he won many congressional seats, not enough for him to rule single-handedly, for sure. So he needs to have a coalition in order to get things done in the congressional, in the legislative level, and then at the local level. But they've got to get on board because they realize that, the people's mood has changed.
All right. It's going to be very interesting to see how he governs going forward, but it is great for business. And as you said,
it's going to be good for the U.S.
It's going to be good for the U.S.
It's going to be good for U.S. relations. He and Trump, he'll probably make a little bit of noise, at first about, the U.S. isn't going to tell us what to do, which is typical in Latin America.
Right.
The Yankees are not going to be our bosses, et cetera, et cetera. But after there's a little bit of shouting and noise, the reality is going to be that he and Trump are going to see more eye to eye, and they're going to shake hands, and business will be done. And the other thing is it will also, I expect that there will be more increased security cooperation, right? This is the biggest country in Latin America. Mm-hmm. They've always been, the U.S. has always tried to kind of share information on, whether it's counterterrorism or anti-smuggling or money laundering and contraband, because there's always so much contraband in Latin America. And and they're always a little bit slow to participate with the Americans. That's going to change with Bolsonaro. He's going to cooperate more with the U.S. on security issues. So just there'll be a little, as I said, there'll be a little bit of hysteria when he first gets in, and then look for it to improve. And I think this is good.
Well, you predicted it. Fascinating overview. Let's get back to the States. I mean, you predicted the whole thing in Brazil. A year ago, you predicted this to me. You're spot on. What do you think is going to happen in 8 days in the United States midterms?
What do I predict is going to happen? I think it's going to be interesting because to tie it back into, what has happened with the caravans, for instance, did you see that the migrant caravan was an attempt, we found out it was being funded by these sort of left-wing organizations, right, that was coming to including the Venezuelan government and other organizations, and they were designed to humiliate Trump, right? That was the idea, in order to shift the midterm elections. Now it's going to have the unintended effect. So, and the Democrats have been silent on that issue. So have been silent, have been saying, we're pro-migrants, et cetera. So there has been this play that even from foreign forces that they thought they were going to have all these migrants crash the border, and then you would have this other scandal of babies separated from their mothers. From the foreign perspective, they thought, that was really bad for Trump. It made him look bad. Let's do that again. Let's have more of that. And that will shift the midterms. And there'll be a blue wave, right? And then we can get Trump impeached, and they don't like Trump, right? These left-wingers in the region. But I think Trump has handled it so effectively, and by stopping it and forced the Mexicans to stop it, that he now looks stronger than ever, and he now looks like he was right. And therefore, it's maybe, and the Democrats look weak. They've said nothing about it. So the issue that was viewed, one of the key issues that was viewed as humiliating for Trump has now been a backlash and is going to be good for him. So I think that's one of the things, one of the changes that we have seen, that maybe the blue wave won't be as blue. So
Vanessa, what you're saying is you have evidence that the caravan was originally funded and still is funded by left-wing groups in both South America and perhaps the U.S., funneling money there, that wanted to have this to impact the midterms by embarrassing the president, kids in cages, all that. And they started out with 1,000. Maybe they thought it would be 2,000. It's gotten out of hand. It's now 9,000. They can't stop it. It's growing bigger and bigger. The president has put troops at the border, National Guard at the border. He says they're not going to get in. He's looking as if he's handling this with skill and poise and determination. And now it's going to blow up in their face. I think that's exactly it.
What I'm saying.
It's going to blow up in their face, and they're going to end up snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I got to go. I'm out of time. John Fredericks Radio Network. Vanessa Neumann with us at Asymmetrica.